Welcome to the North Group podcast. At North Group, we are invited into organizations to influence leadership and organizational behavior. It is absolutely fascinating work. Today, we invite you into one of those conversations.
I'm Brian Black, partner and consultant at North Group Consultants, and I have the privilege today of being with two great friends, colleagues, and until very recently, both fellow shareholders of North Group with me. First, let me introduce Roger North.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep. Roger founded North Group 28 years ago and has served as president and chairman of the board for most of those 28 years, I believe. Mm-hmm. I've had the privilege of being your colleague for 12 years, and I can tell you there's nothing I'm more grateful for than the privilege and gift to me and my family. And then my partner and my friend, Jerry Murray.
Hi, Brian.
Yeah, Jerry, you joined North Group in 2009,
Very end
I
of
believe.
2009. That's right.
End of 2009.
December 28th.
Yes. And Jerry, you bring an energy and a vision and a passion to the work we do internally and to our clients that inspires me. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't get any better than this, than sitting with two great friends to talk about something that's really important to all of us and we're grateful for.
Thanks, Brian. And you as well.
Yeah, thank you. So as far back as 10 years ago, the three of us and our two other partners really realized that we needed to begin thinking about the long-term succession plan. First, perhaps for Roger, both with respect to leadership and ownership, but also beyond even perhaps Roger. Mm-hmm. And I would say along those 10 years, there's a couple what I'd call major milestones that seemed pivotal there. The first one that I'll call pivotal, although there's more to it, about 4 years ago, a little more than 4 years ago, Roger, when you transitioned your role of president to Jerry. Mm-hmm. And then reel the clock forward to just about 2 weeks before the time that we're actually recording this podcast, when we completed another major milestone. And Roger, you would have transitioned the ownership of your shares in North Group to 4 what I'll call half next-gen shareholders, as well as with that transitioning your role as CEO and as chairman of the board.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
I mean, these are exciting and wonderful things. And having completed these in your roles as founder, we thought it'd be important and helpful to our viewers and listeners for us to give an inside view of our own leadership and ownership succession planning and our journey, with the hope that our story and the things we've learned and our experiences along the way will encourage and inspire and hopefully challenge our viewers and listeners to take an intentional and purposeful approach to their own succession planning in their organizations.
Yeah.
So guys, are you ready?
Yeah.
Let's
We're
enter
ready.
in.
Yep.
Well, let's start with something just to set the groundwork here. Here we are, just 2 weeks past, Roger, the second part of the transition, the stock transition. And I want to check with both of you. Sitting here today, how are you feeling sitting here now?
Yeah, to me, it feels right, if I can use that word, because the most important thing for me historically would be that the firm had a future. Mm-hmm. And I knew that if it's going to have a future, it would eventually be a future that did not include me. So that requires some thinking and some planning and some emotional adjustment at times. But I would say it has involved emotion. I won't deny that. But not so much more recently, because it just feels like we've worked through that and we've handled that well. And certainly we've all had our moments with it. But more recently, it just seemed like I went home that night and I thought, it's time. This was the right thing to do for the firm. It was the right thing to do for the younger folks that got an opportunity to be owners, and I think it'll be the right thing for me as well. Yeah. That's where I am.
Yeah, we're grateful for that.
Yeah.
Just before we started recording this podcast, Roger reported to us that he had his lowest blood pressure recorded at his doctor's office in recent memory. So we're not sure how those
We're
correlate.
happy for you,
Are
Roger.
they correlated?
We
or
are
not?
grateful
Yeah,
to hear
yeah,
that
are
news.
they correlated?
Yeah. So Jerry, how about you? How are you feeling sitting here?
A mixture of feelings. I'd say first and foremost, I feel nostalgic. I'm a little bit of a sentimental type, and we've had some wonderful relational times together as partners, growing together over the time that we've all been together, including Craig and Brian.
Sure.
And I was walking in the park this week, and I looked at the window where we had our celebratory dinner after Roger completed the stock sale the other day, and I thought, wow, that time, even those 10 days or however many days went by quickly, and it's just a reflection of how time passes. So nostalgia is one way. I feel energized. There's still work to do and work to be done.
Yep.
And we have big plans and we're moving forward with those. But if I would put all those together, it would be celebratory. I feel like we did this well. It wasn't easy. There were just walking in faith through the process, having resolve, approaching it with diligence, but maintaining hope every step of the way and seeing just wonderful results. So really thankful, and we're celebrating.
It's interesting working closely with both of you. I experience what you described, Roger, in you, this sense of, I really think this is good and I'm at a place, arrived at a really good place. And Jerry, I see the energy and this belief that, God has another season for us. Let's go.
Yep.
It's
Both
exactly
of those things.
Exactly what I'm observing, and really privileged to be able to be up close and personal. Well, we know that all these kinds of transitions require intention and time and lots of preparation. So I want to ask both of you, what are the key ways that each of you and even North Group really prepared for these transitions that we just described?
Yeah. So when you say prepared for the transitions, do you mean the internal work that we've done, or are you starting to think about the steps that we've taken just to get ready for the transition?
I think you could answer both because both are true. I think we'd agree. There's internal work, and then of course there's external. So take it where you want.
Yeah.
And we'll go from there together.
Sure. Well, I'll go first if that's okay. I'd say internally and maybe even partially from a broader view, just a recognition that a transition needed to happen and that it was going to require work. Roger founded North Group 28 years ago. He founded it on personal strengths that he has, on a vision, a mission that he had. We've had, and we can talk about more, just a lot of confidence that we share this vision and mission, and yet our strengths and our gifts are a little bit different. And so to think, wow, this is going to be a transition. Roger is a huge part of who we are. How are we going to prepare ourselves and prepare our team for this? How's Roger going to prepare for this, knowing that he has strength of conviction and how things work, and it's been successful for us. So part of it is just recognizing the different elements of what we might face during this transition, and yet, just more so than ever, building our alignment around who we are as a firm, how we hope to influence clients and the community, how we hope to build a team, and the priorities that we want to put first and paramount in front of anything else.
Roger, what about you when it comes to maybe internal preparation? Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, there is emotion involved with doing things or giving things up that you haven't given up before. And, I would say for a relatively strong personality like I have, or a person that's relatively confident, which in some ways you need to be if you're going to do the types of things that we did, to realize that some of that control, if we can use a word we all understand,
Yes.
has to be given up, and it's not comfortable to do so. And so logically, you know that that's a good thing to do, but the emotions lag behind.
Right.
And as people would ask me over the last few years, hey, how's the transition going? Because we have been working at this for quite a while, and people have known it. It's not a state secret. I would say, well, cognitively, it's going great. Our team's growing. Our firm is successful. Jerry and his team are doing a great job. I have great confidence in them. But emotionally, it has its moments.
Yeah.
That's basically been the phrase that I've given, and that would be true. It's not as much true now. Cognitively, I feel like we've followed our own advice.
Yeah.
We've taken our own medicine, so to speak, very much so, and happy to line out steps in that where it's appropriate. But emotions are something that each person needs to deal with them. When I say themselves, not necessarily alone, but you need to process. You need to have a place to process them. And I'm fortunate that both of you have been places that I've processed that, and I have a couple of friends on the outside, and most particularly my lovely wife, who would just sit and listen to what it felt like sometimes. And then because I'm a verbal processor, I could do that, and then for the most part move on.
In the feeling of control that Roger mentioned, it's not a one-sided experience. It might be from a different perspective. But when you enter transition, you enter an awkward phase where you're doing things that you're not used to. You're hoping for the results to be directly related to your behaviors, but yet they might not be, because we might be hesitating on whose voice to use at what time. When should we lower the decibel of our voice? When should we raise it? How do we invite other people in? Because this is a moving train. This is a growing organization, so it's not static. We don't want it to be. And so it feels awkward. And I think we've all spoken to business leaders on this. I was speaking to one this morning, and in some ways, he was mentioning, some pain of being overworked at this current stage of his business. And yet, as he thinks about going through the process of making changes, to allowing others to make decisions, maybe to hire a person or two to fill the void of some of his gifts and strengths, he takes a deep breath and he sighs and he just imagines, wow, I think that's the right thing to do, but it's hard to imagine that I'll experience those results quick enough for it to be comfortable for me. And so it's not always comfortable. It is a release of control for all of us.
Well, and I wonder, just an observation, Roger, back to that same topic. We'll sometimes say that, that ability to drive an organization, to have vision and be energized by it, and then exert some control to move it forward, really is, I would say, is an important component of what an entrepreneur often needs to get where they need to go.
Yes.
And then we get to a transition season, and I wonder if you'd agree with this, the very things that have served you well all the way from founding to the moment as you near transition suddenly can become almost an impediment. Like, I need to release some control. I need to back off, but I'm not used to that. So I've got to work against something and lay down something that for years was one of my primary drivers and success tools. Did you experience a little of that?
Yeah, and I think that Jerry used the word awkward a few minutes ago. There were, I don't really feel this anymore, but I would say for the first 2 years, Jerry became president in January of 21, there was awkward times, but they were usually assuaged by he and I getting together and just being clear about who was going to do what, because there was a period where, even though he was now the president and he was running the leadership team meetings, and I was not in those leadership team meetings, he still wanted me to drive some things here, and we shared those things. But sometimes when we weren't talking to each other because we were running our own race, so to speak, we would cross over. And I think the firm felt that for a period of time, but we have mature enough people that they weren't surprised by that. So yeah, I think having two drivers, when I say drivers, we're using this term of people who get up in the morning and have energy to move something off of square one or into the fourth quarter of the race or whatever it might be. He and I are both oriented to that. So where I felt like it was time for me to let up a little, I didn't think that we would lack for it because Jerry and other members of our team have that.
Yes.
I just knew it would be done in a different way.
Right.
And then that would be uncomfortable in some cases because I would think to myself, well, if I were doing that, I would have. But as time went on, that became less of a concern, primarily because his team was responding so well. And frankly, the organization did very well under those circumstances, which certainly made it a lot easier because most of us are somewhat results oriented. We're very process oriented, believing the game leads to the numbers on the scoreboard, but you still look at the numbers on the scoreboard. Ours have been by God's grace, those have been very good over the last 4 years. So that has, without question, that has made it easier.
Yeah. You mentioned something in there about at times you were both running your own race. And I would have observed that there were times because of that, maybe the two of you didn't find your way to each other as regularly
Right.
at times.
Right.
And an observation I'd have is that when you were and had a regular rhythm, that seemed to be an accelerant, and it seemed to really help, I'd say accelerate the cohesion and advancing as a matter of principle. Did you experience that way when you were talking and really in a rhythm? We were making more progress than when we weren't.
Brian, you're exactly right. It's something that I certainly learned. Roger would know as well, that the more touch points we would have at any point in this process, the more we could even absorb the differences of perspective and opinion that we have, because we understood the greater context for it. We, would learn more of a reason why. It would give us more of a point, more points to digest and it would invite each other's perspectives so that we can have the best possible approach to decision making. So sometimes you might be afraid to enter one another's office because you have a different perspective. You either don't want to interrupt some momentum that's there, or you might love, to have the support that you think, it might just take a little bit of time to digest. Roger and I both have just a little bit of D in our behavioral profiles, so we like to move quickly.
Yes, you do.
And at the same time, it is just so true that you want enough touch points so that the only time you're touching or interacting isn't just to say, hey, I wish you would have told me about that.
Right.
Right.
We had regular one-on-ones, and they were always, I would say without exception, always productive. Not always completely in agreement, but always productive. Yeah. I think where some of the challenges lies, and this applies in lots of areas of life and certainly lots of areas of business, is when you just get so busy. Right. Or the half hour that you have where you would like to connect with Jerry and maybe talk something over. He doesn't. Doesn't have that same period of time open. That's where it gets challenging. Yeah. And then the touch points get less frequent than they should be, and then others maybe notice a little bit of that friction. So that would be a piece of advice, whether it's for a marriage or a friendship or a business relationship, is have those regular times that you set aside that are formal and they're on the calendar. It's 9:30 on the second Thursday, that sort of thing. But don't skip the 5 minutes or the 10 minutes. And this really worked very well in our case, particularly because Jerry was good at it. He and I are both early morning people, so we're fairly often the first two in the office. And he would come over at a relatively early hour and say, do you have 5 or 10 minutes? Yes. And most cases, I would say 4 times out of 5, I would be able to say yes. Yeah. And then mostly it was just him, I'm thinking about doing this, or we're going to move forward with X, just as a courtesy, I think, to me, that I wouldn't be surprised by something that was moving forward that I wouldn't have been involved in. And that was really valuable. I would encourage that, and that would apply well beyond business. Oh, yeah. Certainly apply to marriages and other important relationships in life, is don't skip those little 3 and 5 minute conversations.
Really good. Let's step a little higher and look down on this a little bit from a higher vantage point. And the question I have for both of you, is there a sense that this whole transition process moved somewhat in some seasons or stages? And if so, I'd be curious how you would characterize the seasons or stages of this 10-year journey.
Yeah, definitely in seasons. I'll name them the way that I articulate them when people ask, and then Jerry can provide color commentary on that. I think of 4 years in the 10-year space, 2015, 2017, 2021, and 2025. Why do I think that way? Well, 2015 was when we just looked at each other and said, we need to start thinking about this. At that point, you guys would have all known that the idea was that the firm would go on not only past me, but past us, and that took some intentionality. Yep. So we started orienting our quarterly meetings more toward that idea. 2017 was then when I sold out of my majority position. I had had a lot of advice from the outside, and I talked about this in another podcast, never to give up my majority position. A lot of people feel that way, and there may be situations in which that's good advice. In our case, that would not have been good advice. But we just had to get to a point of a common view of the future where we all felt comfortable doing that. And it was very rewarding to me that when I was willing to do that, all four of you, meaning the two of you and Daryl and Craig, were all willing to reinvest. Because I think that sent a confidence note to the rest of our firm. Then in 2021, we unanimously agreed, the five of us unanimously agreed that Jerry would carry this into the future with the title of president, which he's done an outstanding job of. And then, as you mentioned, here in 2025 was when the rest of my shares were offered to others. And that's very rewarding, too, because, we're a service firm, so we don't have a lot of hard assets. Yep. And I like to say, I imagine Jerry has a more sophisticated way to say this than I do, but when you're buying into a privately held firm, all you are buying is access to future profitability. That's all you're buying. So when people are buying shares in a firm, they're buying with a level of confidence that there's a foundation there that they can build on and do something with. And that's a testament both to what we've built and to their confidence to continue to build. And that's a very rewarding thing because we had four very, very bright, sharp people who were willing to do that. And that was a reward. So those would be the four seasons the way I saw it, with lots in between.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. I remember each of those seasons. If I go all the way back to when I started at the end of 2009, I think we had 5 full-time employees at the time and a few part-time employees. And so leadership and how things got done, it was different. Roger led us, he had vision for us, but we all joined in and everyone kind of had a role. But growth just kept happening, 1 person, 2 people, 3 people a year. And when we got to 2017, I believe that's the year that we moved into this building here in Lidditz as well, we realized we were at the size where we need to put in a little bit more structure. So I was viewing things from the operational mindset and the capacity. We're all serving externally, including Roger that whole time, and I was too. And yet the internal structural demands, the clarity of vision and the clarity of operational processes and efficiencies was requiring a little bit more. And I remember at that time creating a few new operational roles. When we entered here for the first time, we created consulting teams. And we had someone, we asked Daryl to lead our human resources and facilities management. So we started to just ask people to carry some roles. And for me, that was a big phase because we were now providing authority or at least responsibility to some new leaders in the organization. We were naming individuals. And if we fast forward just a few more years, in early 2020, and this kind of bled into 2021, we invited a few new owners, these half next-gen owners, at least at an initial level of ownership. And as they came in, and even in some of the conversations we had, it became clear to me 2 things. One is they wanted to feel like we had the leadership capacity to continue to grow. They were investing money in the company. They wanted to know it was going to be a wise investment as they had now access to future earnings. And so they wanted to see our capacity grow. And I think they also wanted to know that there might be a pathway for them to serve in a leadership role. And so that for me was the doorway through this transition of the president role to suggest, hey, we should now create a leadership team that demonstrates a desire to grow our capacity and maybe even to invite some new individuals who, there's so many qualified individuals here at North Group, but certainly some very qualified ones to come in. And that's when our structure changed just one more time.
There's a point in there that Jerry may not want to pull out, so I'll pull it out for him, that I think people should be thinking about when they think about transition, is that organizations need different types of emphases and different types of leadership in different seasons. And just the way things unfolded here at North Group, my emphasis was on, to use a broad phrase, business development. I'm not just talking about sales and bringing in revenue, although we did do that and needed to do that, but hiring good people, geographical expansion, services expansion. But Jerry is an operator, and I'm not, or I never got there. And sooner or later, there was going to be a deficit. And Jerry spoke very well to it, is that you get to a size where you just need to have some internal processes. And I don't know if I hadn't recognized that or just didn't want to do that. But that was a really important phase because you get to a certain point, and without that, you may still be growing and you may still be doing the business development thing, but you'll become less efficient. And then people may become less confident in the future because they don't see the pathways that you referred to. So for us, it was whatever the number was, a number of years of developing the business along the lines of the vision and developing a reputation and turning the flywheel, like we like to talk about, other people being willing to speak on your behalf, bringing in good people. But then Jerry, and we have some other folks here, excellent operators too, could think through how does this flow internally so that externally it operates even better. Yeah. And that allowed, I've always been a person about efficiency, but it was Jerry and the team that put those efficiencies internally so that they could shine externally. And so I think just recognizing that at different points in your growth, that most entrepreneurs are not going to have all the skills that they need to be the chief decision maker and implementer at certain points in an organization's history. And if I had gone much longer doing it the way I was doing it, it would have slowed our growth, I have no doubt.
Yeah. Can I ask a short follow-up on that, Roger? Were you aware of that on the front side and realized that's what needed to happen? Or did you, in a sense, kind of walk toward that understanding as you started to experience what Jerry was promoting? Do you understand my question?
I think so. Yeah, I would see it much more clearly in the rearview mirror because that was not the windshield that I was looking through.
Right.
But by then, Jerry was at least sitting in the passenger seat.
Yeah.
And he had a voice at the table because he was so credible. And he was saying things that I didn't really want to do and probably resisted, not rightly, but probably did. But when we began to recognize he had those talents that was necessary, it accelerated our growth rather than decelerated it. Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I would have recognized that on my own. I think Jerry and others of you, Daryl, Craig certainly spoke into those types of things, and I was probably somewhat resistant to some of them. So as your voices grew louder around that, and as we invited more people to speak into that, I think that's where it kicked in, and we knew we needed I call it an operator, and it's a hard spot to be in. It's a particularly hard spot to be in at North Group because, as Jerry said, we all consult. So while I was doing my business development thing, I had a full load of clients. While Jerry was doing his operator thing, he had a full load of clients. While you're developing our succession and transition planning services, you have a full load of clients. Yes. So you can't allow those things that are developing the organization to take a back seat, but some days it feels like they do. But we didn't allow that to go on in a way that injured the firm. But we needed an operator, and Jerry's a great operator.
And North Group was built around Roger's strengths, his initial vision. Living out North Group is very, very intuitive for Roger. When we were small, people could just kind of glean off of the influence of Roger in the work that we did every day. They could ask a quick question, they could observe. As we get a little bit bigger, people aren't influenced as much by Roger just because of proximity.
Right.
You know, when I first started, I think we had 35 clients in a given year. Now it's over 200. And so that's would just suggest that there's more work to be done. And so as people come in, you also overlay different levels of expectation regarding, direction, whether people loved the freedom to just go figure it out. Yeah. We know what our mission is. We You can point us to where the tools are that we use, let me add it, versus others that say, hey, can you walk through this with me a few times? All very, very gifted people that, just bleed North Group values and care so much about our clients and will do whatever it takes to see them move towards their highest potential within that framework. And at the same time, we would feel operationally that we needed to provide more, which might feel like a slowdown. It could feel interruptive. It could feel inefficient sometimes.
Yes.
Not to blame a person for that, but just to recognize as you grow, that's what we need, because then that accelerates the flywheel when we have that clarity to offer to our entire team.
And most times they were kind enough to make me an exception to the process so I could still do what I wanted to do.
Totally true. Oh,
We did do that a few times.
yes. Well, let me ask you what I think are short questions, but I think they're really appropriate. And they're both sides of the coin. For both of you, what has been the most rewarding parts of this whole transition? And then we're going to flip it, and we're going to talk about perhaps what's been most challenging. Okay? So I'll flip it to either one of you. What's been most rewarding?
Probably two things for me. Maybe they're two sides of the same coin. One would be that I really always, I felt that, however high-minded this may sound, that I had a God-given mission. Mm-hmm. And if it was a God-given mission, then it needed to continue. Yeah. And I guess I would say, convicted about that from the start. And so I knew that it wasn't supposed to end with me. It wasn't my God-given mission. It was a God-given mission, if that makes sense. So to see it going forward and to know that it long ago gave up a dependence on me, I may still be a contributor, but to see that lessen over time might emotionally not feel great, but cognitively it's exactly what needs to happen. So that's very rewarding. And then I mentioned the second thing, which is to have very gifted, talented people who could be very successful other places and could invest their money other places, choose to invest it here with a belief that this God-given mission will go forward and will bring benefit to more people in the future and will continue to be successful regardless of whether I'm here or not. That is very rewarding.
Yeah, I think we're enjoying you experiencing that rewarding piece.
Thank you.
It feels like part of the capstone of a job well done, that there is some reward and satisfaction. Jerry, what about you?
That and slightly lower blood pressure.
Maybe I could get off some of those pharmaceuticals.
I love hearing Roger's answer that question, because I also had two things that hit me, and they were somewhat analogous. The first one is just this concept of our faith journey. It requires us to walk in places where we're not quite sure what the results are going to be. And as you enter, this awkwardness of transition, and, you are trusting the process, and at the same time knowing that we're not quite there yet, but we're doing the right things. We're waiting for, hearts and minds to align. I would say hearts definitely in terms of missional, but even, the feeling that this is the right thing. Not the transition, but the different decisions within transition, and then seeing the wonderful results on the other side. It really is a motto of the work that we do with clients. It's sustained relationships. It's walking along that faith journey to move leaders and organizations toward our highest potential. And the second one really is that organizations grow as you go through this process. There's many opportunities for our organization to get better. And many individuals on our team just stepped up through the process as leadership opportunities availed themselves, and they continue to. And it's just a pattern, I think, that would give hope for our entire team.
And the hope I see, too, is as our team has grown, the cohesion among and across the organization actually feels stronger today than perhaps it ever has. And that's not suggesting it wasn't good in the past.
Right.
Bring that many different people into an organization, but seeing this group share a common purpose and really, I think, be inspired by this transition in many ways, because there is another season for North Group that will bring all kinds of new opportunities.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing to watch the outcome of a transition like this and what it's meant for our team. What about challenges? When you think about the primary challenges that you encountered along the way, or perhaps the hard conversations that might have needed to occur? Are there any that come particularly to mind that we maybe want our listeners and our viewers to recognize might be true in their world as well?
Yeah, I would say for me, when I'm thinking about that question, I'd say you come face to face with your own ego, and you come face to face with your own selfishness. And we're all, no matter who you think of, any human being
Right.
has a hint of both of those. We admire people that have been able to really reduce those two so that they're not noticeable. But yeah, I would say that I really had to do some spiritual work and some emotional work, and have some folks, as I mentioned before, that I could just process that with on the outside, to be willing to give things up that I had the power, if I could use that word, to hold on to, but I knew weren't good to hold on to. So if I held on to them, that would make it a selfish act. But giving it up was still within my control, another strong word, and getting to the point where I did so willingly and not grudgingly was a journey. It wasn't an event. So I would say, yes, it helped me recognize how selfish I can be and how ego-oriented I can be and continue to be in some areas, but also to look back and think, okay, we got through that. And we did let go of some things. And frankly, when I let go of them, they got taken hold of by other people and improved upon, some of which we've already talked about here. So I think every entrepreneur has to, or founder or president or whatever your terminology is, has to do some spiritual work around the idea that their selfishness, however that may manifest, is going to get in the way of something better.
That's really good, Roger.
Yeah, I so appreciate the honesty of that answer. I think for me, learning about level of impatience and just waiting for the ability to maybe move in directions that I would be most comfortable with. Roger and I have some shared strengths, but certainly different gifts for sure. And so, there's an element of fear. Am I going to be able to walk in the shoes of this founder of a wonderful, wonderful organization that I admire so much, before and even while I sit here? And, I heard a speaker just recently talk about fear in a leader can bring out different reactions and responses. And to recognize and learn that I want to pause and I want to do the internal work, spiritual and otherwise, with accountability, to see that those responses are as positive as possible. I do think of two conversations that were challenging, just generally speaking. One of them was a recognition that Roger and I want to make sure that we are for each other in this process. Because sometimes when you're feeling different perspectives on different sides, then the competitive spirits kick in and
Competitive? Who are you referring to?
yeah, right. So, and that conversation was two ways, that we can be for one another. And I think the other one, it's just more general. As we approach strategic initiatives, I would hear the voice of the next generation of North Group and things that we're eager to do and believe that they make a lot of sense for the future. And at the same time, they would just be different than where we come from. And to recognize, and this goes back to my patience, to give Roger some time to digest these things and to understand, the purpose would be both to continue in the mission of North Group, but also to satisfy the gifts of the team that's building capacity behind us too.
Yeah.
I think it got a lot easier too in some of those conversations when we embrace that some of our differences in perspective and style could be complementary, but that complementary work needed to be done in private so that it could benefit the firm in public. Does that make sense? So
Yes.
an easy one would be, I would think of Jerry as a hardened realist. Here is the situation, and here are the pluses and the minuses. One of my best friends kindly refers to me as the irrational optimist.
It's really good.
So we would be talking, the two of us would be talking in private about maybe something was happening in the firm or a forecast, and most likely a forecast of, the next 6 months or what it's looking like. And, I'd be waving my hand and say, it's going to be fine. I see all kinds of good stuff out there in the future. And Jerry would be saying, but look at this. Look at this. This is not what we planned for.
We are not responsible if we don't do something right now.
Right. So we would put that together
Yes.
and land somewhere, in between, so to speak.
Right.
Bring an optimistic view to our team, but not ignoring the fact that there were some things that needed to be done now to make that optimism true.
Yes.
Right.
And I think generally we get to a team meeting or some sort of communication that would go out to the team, it would come out with that in a blender. And I think we did that mostly, if not almost completely, behind a closed door, because we always want to have a unified front.
Yeah.
And it's not a facade. It's just we have to work through that, because my irrational optimism runs out after a period of time. And maybe his realism comes across as not as hopeful as the way that we want to present ourselves. When you put those two together, you get something that was, I think, for the most part, motivating to our team and to our clients.
Yeah. Oh, and I would just clarify, maybe not as strategically hopeful, but in terms of hope, I think that's what enabled us to come out on the other side publicly, because we'd work through it and we'd say, okay, this is why this is a good part of the solution. This is why this is a good part of the solution.
Right.
And this is what we commit to together and what we want to lead our company
And
to.
Jerry's much more, he's a better strategic thinker than I am, and he's a better tactician than I am. So that would put those two things together. Okay, Roger, you go do your thing and let me work through these details and with the team. And when we did those, we often got a decent result or a very good result.
Yeah. But guys, thank you for that. It's a great part of the journey that's very real and often isn't evident to people that are sitting on the other side of that door. The importance of the good work you have to do with the door closed with each other.
Yeah.
And it's produced great fruit. And all of us are grateful that you did that behind the door work together. Well, you guys know that North Group guides leaders and organizations through succession, both ownership and leadership succession, day by day. It's one of our core business lines. So just a few questions around that, taking our own medicine, as you would call it, Roger. How has this transition been informed by the work that we do with our clients? Like, how do you bring that into play here in this process?
Yeah, I would say from the beginning, we felt the responsibility, probably a good word, to make it a process, as we encourage our clients to do, and to follow a similar process to what we would guide our clients through, and to learn from our own walking through that process. There's an old joke that, people become consultants because they can't do.
Yeah.
And we do not want to be that, and don't think we have been that.
Yeah.
So walking through all those stages that you and Laurent and the rest of our transition and succession planning team would do was important here. And I would say one of those things, and then I'll kick it to Jerry for his observations, but one of those things would be a phrase that we've used is, relationships need to lead transactions, not the other way around. So we had to get to a point, the five of us, the three of us, Daryl and Craig, had to get to that one voice point that we could speak to the organization with one voice and not just Roger's voice and four other people. When we got to that point, then that was when we were ready to do more of the ownership business, the share trading and things of that nature, not before. We see too many firms doing it the other way around. So that was a process that we followed. That is advice that we would give very consistently to our clients.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything Roger said. I would say just a few other things that came to mind. One is start early. We obviously did that. If we go back 10 years, as Roger described it before, and we need it. What we and our firm's better off because we started early. Something else to consider, that often leadership succession is not a one-for-one transition, particularly when we're moving from a founder to the next generation, whether it's because the gifts are different or because the size is different. But it's so easy to believe, hey, we need to replicate this one person in someone else. And then that makes differences and even criticisms a little bit easier because, things are different here. Multiple touch points. We've already talked about it. We want to have lots of conversations, and we want to be prepared to offer grace to one another. But I'd say the biggest thing that we knew, and it's what we do, and it really benefited us, is we want to have help. So beyond Roger and me, we want to have someone speaking into this. And we had the luxury of 3 partner board members, talking about you, Brian, and Daryl and Craig, who just walked with us through the process. And when you became significantly involved in this process, particularly as we went through the last 4 years, it just got better and better and better, I'd say, and our whole team would have experienced that.
Yeah.
And I think you don't want to underestimate the importance of, I think of it as friendship, but having really respectful relationships with the people that are helping you along the way. Because I'll give you 2 examples. One would be Daryl and I have been together for 22 and a half years. And for all of those years, our offices have been adjacent to each other in 3 different buildings. And Daryl's not as strong a personality as me. Sometimes I cut him off or overpower him or do things that I really shouldn't do. But he would always be willing to come over after a meeting or when I was, going rogue, so to speak, and just have a soft word of, you might want to think about that. And because of my respect for him and frankly love for him, even when I didn't agree with him, I wanted to hear and absorb what he had to say. And then the absorption of that would probably tenderize like you would a meat before you grill it, would tenderize my approach to that. And I would say Craig Schloniger is another person I would mention because his friendship, his and my friendship preceded his coming to North Group.
Yes.
And so there was already a basis of confidence there and he's a more direct person. So his visits to my office were very short. They would just simply say, basically, you're a knucklehead and, fly up, sit up and fly right or something like that. And then he would leave. And, with Craig, you immediately realize he's right and you're wrong. You've had those moments too, I'm sure.
Thank you, Craig.
But, the point there, rather than, getting into too much individualization, is to have people close to the situation that know your strengths and weaknesses, but that their intentions are for the best.
Right.
And I haven't spent 5 minutes doubting the intentions of any of you, that we were on the same page, even though the behaviors inside of those intentions didn't always feel comfortable. So just to have that, we were blessed with having that help internally. Most firms are going to need to contact a North Group to get that type of help, and we would frankly encourage you to do so. But in our case, we had these talented people inside who understood Jerry and me really well.
Yeah. An observation, which I think is the way it should be, is that our relationship among the 5 of us, and really across the firm, has grown deeper and deeper and deeper over the years. And the transition process itself, with some of the conversations that need to occur, and we need to be for each other, and how do we do that well, I think has really contributed to us finding our 5-guy meetings to be some of the sweetest times that we have around the table. And I think that's a fair thing. Do you guys agree with that?
Very much so.
And I would not only agree, I would tell you that one of the difficult things for me is I don't want to have that anymore. And I recognize that, and I feel a little wistful about it. It's not that you won't be my friends anymore, but I won't be in those meetings anymore. It's not appropriate for me to be in those meetings anymore. And some of the, shall we use the term, fellowship, encouragement, accountability that I got from those, I'll need to find that. I'm recognizing that in my life. I'll need to find that somewhere else, or load up on another few relationships that I'm fortunate to have on the outside, because that has been of such great value.
Yeah. Just a few more questions, I think, that just come at a high level, but I think they're important for us to talk about together. First of all, do you each as, founder and president, would you say that you have the same vision for the future of North Group, or do you see it differently?
We, I would say I have total confidence that the mission, if I could use that term, and our bedrock core values will not only go on, they will be strengthened under this leadership that we have. The vision goes off of the mission, but it will have different strategies and it will have different ways of being played out. And our services will expand and evolve. And I'm all for that. But I don't know all of what that's going to be. And I would certainly hope that I have at this point and will want to do in the future, just be on the sidelines cheering it on, even if it's something I wouldn't have thought of myself. So total confidence in the God-given mission being continued, the bedrock values being lived out internally and externally. But the strategic initiatives, the services that will roll out, the new talent that we'll bring into the organization that will add to that will change, and I'll be cheering it on.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
I would affirm completely exactly what Roger said. The 24 individuals that call North Group home currently are here because we share these core values, because we love the mission, and quite frankly, because we would just lean on these same eternal truths that just inspire both that mission and those values. And we are absolutely committed to them for the decisions we make, for how we interact both internally and externally. And it's because we know they work. And in terms of, strategies, they might change, services, they could adjust here and there. We want to not just stay relevant, but we want to continue to have influence and impact and be responsive to what's going to help our clients move toward their highest potential. But we are in lockstep.
Yeah, I have no concern about that.
Yeah. So Roger, what legacy do you hope to leave behind at North Group?
Not to be repetitive, but the God-given mission. Through sustained relationships, we encourage people and organizations toward their highest potential, and I'm fortunate that's also, with slightly different pronouns, that's my life mission as well. So I'm hopeful that I'll continue to do that in a different season of life and in some different ways. I'm going to continue to do some work on behalf of North Group, but it won't be leadership work. I guess the other thing I would say, and Jerry knows this, you guys know this, is the five of us were at another place not that long ago, and we saw one of their core values on the wall. And it was a great statement of that firm's core values. And we all looked at it and we said, hey, that's great for this firm. Why wouldn't we affirm it? And it said something about, which you see in many different places, and there's nothing wrong at all with this. Our customers will always come first. Here we would say our employees will always come first. We love our employees and we love our employees' families. And if they're taken care of and their needs are provided for and they're given the resources they need to succeed and live out what God's called them to do, our clients will benefit in ways that they will never even recognize. Because the being of those employees, who they are, who they're becoming in this environment. So that's why, and I'm not being critical of any firm that puts the customer first. In fact, I love being put first when I go to restaurants and retail establishments. But for us, it's employees and employees' families. And if employees' families are seeing an employee come home energized, growing, more committed as a father, mother, parent, grandparent, community member, our firm's going to be successful. And I believe that since the beginning. We all believe that, and that feels like a legacy that will continue and that I'll be happy to support and observe.
I'll just pile on real quick. You guys know I have a recent loss in my family of a family member. And I said, the day I came back to work, I said, there's no better place for me to go in a time like this than to with this team, which really just reflects the care that I experienced we have for each other and how that's lived out in real time.
Yeah, that's real.
It's real. Jerry, for you, what aspects of Roger's leadership or legacy do you envision carrying forward, if you will?
Well, I could list a lot. They would be hopes and dreams for me. But the two that Roger's heard me say before, and I really, really mean, is one is just this creative and very other-centered generosity. He naturally thinks about how can we be generous in this situation. And the other one is this optimism that he speaks of, hey, it's a leader's responsibility to come in and bring and breathe hope and demonstrate it and to do so with substance behind it. Yeah. But just to continue to seek that and not be such a hard-edged realist at times. But what I would say about both is there's a supernatural source for both of these, and this is something that I'll be praying for, and hopefully, and I know Roger will be praying for our team in regard to this, to have that spirit of generosity that we believe in, and we want to come naturally to our minds, so that we can do that freely and regularly, and also to be absolutely optimistic, and to put in the work that enables us to fulfill that.
That's beautiful. So as we prepare to land the plane here, a question that I think our viewers would appreciate is this. What encouragement do you have for the folks that are watching and listening, organizations and leaders who are contemplating their own succession transition? What would we offer to them in encouragement?
My usually verbose answers will be reduced to 4 words: start early, get help. Start early, get help.
Yeah, and that message I would echo for sure. We could fill in some gaps between, but I think getting help was really important to us. You can know a lot. You can be very mature. There's still emotional elements to a process, and it is a process. It takes time. So to have somebody who knows what they're doing, but also cares enough to walk with you, continue to point you towards hopeful thoughts as you take that faithful journey through the process is just such a gift. And when you can look back and celebrate in the way that we can, even as we feel nostalgic about the days before, but energized for the days ahead, you're very grateful.
Yeah, I'm sitting here so grateful for this conversation. Your candor is a gift. It's a gift to me. It's a gift to our firm. I think it's a gift to those who are listening and watching. And I think as we wrap up, Roger, I wonder if you might have the last word. I don't know how many more podcasts you're going to have voice on, so I think it'd be great to give Roger the last word on this one.
Yeah, I'm kind of tapped out, Brian. I'm not quite sure what to say other than that. If you can have the gift of knowing that you're in a place where God wanted you. I don't mean to sound overly spiritual or egotistical there, but I have felt like I have been for the last 28 years, largely in the place where God wanted me vocationally. And of course, vocation takes up a good bit of our life. And then to have the gift of doing it with people who are actually your friends and people that you enjoy spending time with. And that is true. We've spoken mostly about our colleagues here and particularly about the 5 of us that have been in lockstep over the last 10 years. But that's true of our clients as well.
Oh, yes.
We invite them in as friends. We work together. We have these long-term relationships. We see children born. We see grandchildren born. We see generations enter and generations pass, and we go to weddings, and we go to baby dedications, and even we go to memorial services. And to just live life with other people where your vocation and your avocation and your family life is all in a beautiful weave together has just been such a privilege. And I hope and pray for that for you. I hope and pray for that for my children and grandchildren. And it's been a great privilege that God's given me to just have a vocation that you enjoy. I used to say I like Friday afternoons and Monday mornings equally. And that's been the case for a long time. And that's a gift.
Yeah. Roger, Jerry, thank you. It's been great to be together.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.